Hello, hello. Okay. Is the audio working? Can everybody hear me out in YouTube land? Good, good. My name is Carmen Brange. I am your stream master for the evening. I'm going to be producing this fine event here tonight. We have a couple of great speakers for you. My Oh, I'm just going to turn this down. My good friend Glenn is going to introduce everybody properly and kick off the event. Just wanted to make sure everything was okay with the YouTube stream, and I'll be here just managing. Let me know if there's any problems with the audio, if you can't hear anything, or audio's too loud, too soft, things are breaking up. You can send me a chat message in the YouTube chat window. I'm listening there. And other than that, Glenn, are you ready? I'm gonna send it over to you. All right, Glenn, you on? Are you on mute? Let's see, no audio for Glenn. There we
Hello?
go. There we
It's not embarrassing at
go.
all. I can't hear myself whatsoever. So
That's
hopefully
okay.
people can hear me. Nod if you or wave if you can.
Yep.
Great. So I'm this is very strange. Anyways, I'm gonna do my best. So I can't hear what other people are saying. So we'll see how it goes from here. So I'm gonna present my screen and bear with me. And so I'm hoping people can hear me. So I'm not getting any volume. So let's see. So anyway, welcome everyone to our our event. Thank you for coming out to support us. And we originally obviously hoped to have this in March, and now things have changed. So we moved this event online, and the topic seemed very timely a month ago, but it seems even more important now as we're trying to figure out um, how what is the new normal, and what is designers' role in it. Like things have become even more chaotic. So this is even more important talk than it was a month ago. So thank you also for supporting Feed the Frontlines. So basically, all proceeds are going to Feed the Frontlines, which is basically an organization that feeds frontline workers that are fighting COVID-19 right now. So your donations are really appreciated, and we thank you. It's going for a good cause. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our presentation. So first up tonight, we'll have LeeAndra Cianci, whose name I just butchered, sorry, and Nicola Hamilton. So LeeAndra is an editorial and commercial illustrator who, his clients include the New York Times, Globe and Mail, and Toronto Life. Um, I'll talk a little bit about Nicola. Nicola is an independent art director and graphic designer who is internationally recognized by the DNAD and Society of Publication Designers. Both are very active in the community. They have really great presence online. They're actually going to talk. I'm not going to really spoil it, but they're going to talk really about their experience in the industry and how they how they can overcome or deal with self-doubt that we all have. I had a chance to hear Nicola speak at RGD, and she had really lots of interesting things to say. She was funny, and we approached them afterwards to talk with us. So we're really excited to have them here. Also, we have our second speaker tonight will be Amélie Sirois. Again, I've butchered your name, and I'm sorry. I apologize. Who who works at Shopify and is actually a content strategist. She is going to be talking about self-awareness and how really to deal with how being self-aware can impact your success and in the industry, because it's not just about our like design skills. This can be our people skills and how we view ourselves. Again, she's going to talk a little bit more about it, so I'm just giving you a little bit of a heads up. Um, so so how this is going to work is that first the Nicola and Leandra are going to have their talk. During, we encourage you to go to Slido and post any questions. After they're finished their talk, we'll go to Slido and we'll answer any questions people have. Then Emily will go after that. Um, so that's about it. So I'm going to hand it over now to Nicola and Leandra, and I'm going to stop sharing, and hopefully someone heard this.
All right.
That was heard. Okay, are you guys ready? Okay,
Cool.
ready? Here
Thanks,
we
Glenn.
go.
Carmen, are we all good to go? You can
You
see everything
are
okay? You can.
Good.
Yeah.
Can we see our slides?
Oh,
All
yeah.
right.
Looks like we're up there. We can see ourselves. This is going to
Okay.
be so weird without an audience. Usually we know when our jokes land. Now we'll just be laughing at each other and ourselves.
Yeah.
Anyways, thank you to the UXPA for having us. We're really excited to be here and talk about our little art baby. And thank you, Glenn, for the introduction. Carmen for, I don't even know what to call whatever you're doing. It's sort of like VJing, I think.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Like Glenn said, my name is Nicola Hamilton. I'm an independent graphic designer. I'm an educator, bunch of other multi-hyphenated things. There is no point skirting around this situation. I am talking to you from the floor of my living room near High Park in Toronto.
And I'm LeeAndra Cianci. I'm an editorial and commercial illustrator. I'm talking to you today from my West Queen West studio in my house. I'm sure we can all relate to the sentiment on the slide right now. Seriously, what is even happening? We obviously don't have the answers and are feeling just as confused and anxious as anyone else during these uncertain times. But we're here and we're super grateful to be talking to you, even though it's through your screens.
Yeah, it's true. We were really looking forward to meeting you in person, but we'll get back to that stuff eventually. Leandra and I are here to talk to you about self-doubt by way of a project we initiated a year and a half ago now called the Scaries. So it started as a personal exploration for us, and now it's ballooned into something a little bit bigger. It's a bit of a study of the emotional realities of being a creative human. We like to start each of these talks by acknowledging the elephant in the room. And I think there's some added pressure right now since this tech thing is new to us. We might totally blow this talk. We never know. Every single one is different. But there's something really liberating for us about getting that out in the open right away. This is usually where people giggle and we feel more comfortable. So I hope you're giggling at home.
Yeah.
So if we blow this talk, we're sorry. We're doing our best. We're human. Who's to say?
Who's to say? Okay, and is the slide gonna go? There we go. So we want to give you guys a little bit of context. We're gonna start with when and where we met. Just a quick sidebar to this slide, you may notice I shouted out my dog at Lenny the Ween. I'm trying to make him Instagram famous, so please follow him. Nicola has a cat named Frankie. She doesn't quite love the spotlight as much, but hopefully you'll see each of them pop into our screens today, which is really the main bonus of doing a virtual talk or work from home meetings, as I'm sure you've all realized.
Yeah.
Dogs and babies.
Pets and babies. So, okay, how and where we met. Leandra and I actually met at the Grid. So I just finished design school in 2011. I graduated from Humber's 3-year graphic design program. And I had my mindset on working in magazines. The grid was only a couple months into its existence at that point. And for those of you who weren't in the city around then, the grid was a free city weekly magazine, or was it a newspaper? Hot debate. It was kind of like Now Magazine. It was free on the street. It was printed on shitty newsprint, but it had massive journalism and design aspirations. The team there was banging out an incredible publication on the craziest schedule, week after week after week. My time at the grid was really formative for me. They were wholly supportive of making the risky decision. And when it failed, which it did sometimes, we have stories. We'd already moved on to next week's issue, and it was no big thing. It was kind of magic.
So in 2013, I had just finished a design internship, and I was looking for a full-time gig. I loved the grid, but they weren't hiring. I basically begged them to take me on as an intern, and they did. I really learned how to be a graphic designer at the grid. Like Nicola mentioned, the deadlines were fast, and pressure of publishing weekly was intense. At this time, I was taking on weekly illustration spots, and at times an entire feature's worth of illustrations on top of my design work. This is where I truly realized that illustration was my passion. And then in the summer of 2014, the grid published its last issue, which is a whole other story.
Yeah, we'll save that for another day. But in hindsight, I think that the Scaries borrows a lot from the spirit of the grid.
And we also owe our friendship to the time that we spent there.
It's true, we do. Okay, so rolling back into the present, now you know, Leandra and I met at the grid. We worked together for a handful of years. Like we mentioned off the top, LeeAndra is an editorial and commercial illustrator, and I'm an independent graphic designer. So while the physical work that we do is different, the nature of it's the same. We're both commercial artists, which is to say that our mandate is to translate our clients' visions into the tangible, to amplify their voices, to communicate their messaging. So there's this thing that happens in the process of working for clients where you can lose your own perspective. You can lose your own voice. It's something that I wish we talked about more as an industry, the way we can totally lose ourselves if we're not being careful.
And combine that with the hyper-connected age we live in, the one where we're constantly comparing ourselves to our peers, and that's a recipe for some serious self-doubt. Additionally, with what's going on in the world right now, we're spending even more time online, comparing and contrasting not only our creative output, but even our day-to-day lives. When we see people killing it in quarantine while we are, okay, maybe just I am sitting on the couch and eating chips, it can be discouraging. But being creative during this time is not a requirement. Everyone's coping differently. More on this later. But with communication being solely online right now, the thought of breaking up with our devices is nearly impossible, as they're our only connection to the world.
And look, even now, while we're sitting on our couches eating chips, our creative output feels inextricably tied to our own self-worth. It's really hard to deny that. The distinction between our personal and our professional lives just seems to get blurrier the longer we spend in the industry.
So enter the Scaries, named after a phrase borrowed from a friend to describe the feelings of self-doubt that you have after a social interaction. You know that feeling when you've just left a party and you're immediately flooded with regret? Or nowadays, maybe that Zoom call you just ghosted because you forgot to go on mute while you were eating some very loud chips. Oh, there's Frankie. And you think, why did I say that? I sounded so dumb. We both started noticing that those same thoughts were appearing in our professional lives.
After almost 10 years in our respective industries, our confidence levels seem to be bottoming out. Why was that? Why were we pitting ourselves against our peers online? We know they're not killing it on every single brief, but we still feel like we don't measure up. Why are we so scared to fail? We get that failure is a valuable part of the process, but we're really not comfortable failing in front of our clients, bosses, or colleagues. And we're pretty sure they're not comfortable with it either, given their unreasonable timelines. Was all this energy that we were expelling doubting our own abilities even necessary? Probably not, but Leandra and I couldn't shake it.
So, what would happen if we freed ourselves from the constraints of our commercial practices and let ourselves embrace our artistic practice? And how would we even do that?
In our case, we started with a small step, like a really, really small step. We signed up for a screen printing class. Neither of us had ever been out of our comfort zone like that. We hadn't learned anything in a really long time without the pressure of a job, a client, a boss. We fucked up a lot, through the process.
And that was okay. We set out to learn something new, to get out of our creative comfort zones, and to explore what it would be like to reconnect with our own instincts, free from the restraints of our commercial work, and especially from the eyes of social media.
This was something we'd never done before, screen printing. Inevitably, we weren't going to be great at it. That feeling of being grounded in imperfection, of knowing there was no other way to get through it, was maybe the lesson we needed to learn the most. We were taking the class together and we were supporting each other through the process, but we weren't actually working together. On the left is LeeAndra's piece from that class, and on the right is mine.
Until we were. As the class was ending, we found ourselves using all of our downtime, excitedly talking about how much we wanted to keep doing this, but together.
And then we did nothing.
We struggled to start. We didn't really know what we were doing, and we had very little rationale for why we were even doing it. But at the very least, we committed to it.
We really did. Okay, we started this process by setting some rules because at the end of the day, we still needed, or to be honest, wanted, I think, rules. Look, an infinite number of possibilities is terrifying to all of us. It doesn't matter how much experience we have. Some of our rules were logistical and some of them were emotional. For the purposes of this reflection, it makes sense to focus on the emotional. So no time restraints, no stress. This is going to take as long as it takes. No forward planning, be present in the moment. We told ourselves we weren't allowed to think about the final product. And no social media. There's a big one, and we'll come back to that in a second. The rest of our parameters had to do with things like ink colors, page dimensions. They were there to help us avoid fear-based paralysis later. We could imagine this world where we halted all progress because we couldn't decide what shade of pink to use, and we didn't want those little details to get in the way of our larger purpose, which at this point was just to make for the sake of making.
Zero social media was a big one. Part of our fears stemmed from always comparing our work and ideas to others. You know that feeling following a fellow creative who's always posting their shiny, finished project with their big, important clients. There stems the feelings of inadequacy. I could never do it as well as they can, or why even bother? Also, the pressure to post every day, write the perfect caption, etc., can be stifling and overwhelming. So starting the process of the Scaries, we wanted to lift that burden. No social media pressure while we were working on the Scaries.
We actually did it, which is kind of impressive as well.
Shocking.
So at the same time as we were setting rules and making plans, a good friend of ours, who also happens to be an emotional savant and a really talented journalist, encouraged us to document our process. She suggested we start before we've taken ink to paper and ask some interview style questions of each other. So we went back, we looked at them and chose some of our favorites, which helped paint a picture of our state of mind as we were starting this project. So LeeAndra, what is the thinking behind this project? Why are you doing it?
Because I overthink everything and literally don't make art because I'm scared it's not good enough. Nicola, what excites you about partnering with me?
In my eyes, absolutely everything LeeAndra touches turns to gold. It really does.
And I think you're a boss. You push me to actually do instead of just talk, commiserate, brainstorm, daydream, etc.
It shouldn't surprise anyone that I am an Aries and LeeAndra is a Pisces.
So, what is your greatest strength as an artist?
So in this moment, before we started this project, I wrote that I don't even consider myself an artist.
And to that, I responded, you are. You're just scared to say you are, but I'm also scared.
We were both really scared.
Yeah.
And our last one is LeeAndra. If you could give me one piece of advice as a friend, a co-creator, what would it be?
To follow your gut, your heart, your third eye, the universe, whatever.
We're pretty cute.
That was pretty cute.
It's fun to go back. Journaling is important. Okay, so the actual work. Here is the gist of how we make the work that we make. I paint blobs.
And then I add scribbles over top, completing the piece.
This process was so fucking cool. There were blobs that I loved and blobs that I thought were total garbage. But once LeeAndra added her layer on top, it completely changed my relationship with them. Some of the ones that I hated the most were now my favorites.
And because they no longer belonged to one of us alone, none of them could be garbage.
They belonged to both of us, and weirdly, neither of us, if that makes sense.
We framed the project this way so that neither of us ever had to fear that the other would be better. A side effect of thinking your creative bestie is the most talented person in the room. It also meant it was easier to ignore those voices that said, "You're not good enough," because we valued the other's work so fully, we were confident it could never fail entirely.
It's worth taking a minute here to point out that it could fail. Neither LeeAndra or I had ever screen printed before, but we knew that if we did fail, we were failing together, and social media wasn't involved.
True. So we made 3 prints, each an edition of 15. When we finished the print series, we were so jazzed. We didn't want to stop. We had saved all the scraps from trimming our paper to size and decided we'd make a handful of original mini paintings. We trimmed a ton of paper to 4x6 and Nicola took them home.
So over the course of a couple weekends, I painted so many blobs, a lot of them, an overwhelming amount of them. By the time I decided to stop and hand them over to LeeAndra, I think I had about 200. LeeAndra took them, and over the course of a couple weeks herself, she drew in graphite over top of them all. They were really cute, and we had a ton of them.
And then
Spoiler.
nothing again.
For a bunch of months.
We would meet up once a month at my place for a glass of wine and a catch up. On one of those evenings, our previously mentioned journalist pal asked to see everything. So we started laying it out, all giggles and sparkly eyes, only to realize we actually had a lot of work.
And in that moment, we had this strange sense that the work didn't belong to us anymore, that it belonged out in the world, that maybe by sharing it, we'd be able to put the energy we'd received from making it back out into the universe.
And don't forget, we hadn't been sharing anything at all online, and we could count the people we'd spoken to about it on one hand. So we decided out of nowhere that we'd show it.
Speaking of terrifying, we took our little art baby that we hadn't shown to anyone and put it up in a physical space. In March of 2019, we opened the Scaries for 3 days here in Toronto.
Hey guys, remember physical gatherings?
Being in the same room as all your pals. Guys, I haven't hugged LeeAndra in a month and a half.
Sad.
Looking back on it now, I do think that a gallery show gave us the ability to create an environment that really mirrored the one we'd built for ourselves. It was a place to be vulnerable, where people were actually encouraged to intentionally confront their fears, and we surrounded them by as much love and support as we could.
So we hid our self-doubt around the gallery, if you can see on the slide there, because, you know, it's hard to know where it'll show up.
This one was on the way to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Sure. We started tenderly calling those miniature 4x6 paintings, the ones that we had a ton of, our anxieties. There were about 150 of them on this wall, and we thoroughly enjoyed watching our friends and strangers mull over which one they wanted to take home with them.
We loved the idea of strangers taking our anxieties home with them.
Like
it's almost like letting them go.
Yeah. We also asked our audience to contribute their own self-doubt to the exhibit by sharing the negative things that they say to themselves, by writing them down on a Post-it note, nothing fancy, and adding it to our collective anxiety wall. See if this plays. Cool. Some of them were hyper specific. Funny even. Totally scared on the cauliflower or the veggie tray. But mostly we are all scared. We're scared that we're not good enough. We're really scared that we'll be found out. But ultimately, we are really, really scared of failing, that we'll never accomplish anything.
So normally if we were doing this talk for you guys in person, we would have set up a wall just like that and asked you to contribute and share your scaries with us. But since we're facing what we're facing, we've opened up an anonymous form on our website for you. So maybe after this talk, if you feel so inclined to share, head to our website, thescariesproject.com, to send your scaries into the void. It feels really good, I promise.
It really does. So going into the Scaries, we didn't realize that we built ourselves a launch pad for emotional growth. That wasn't the plan. But the project changed us as creatives, for sure, but also as humans. It pushed us to confront our own self-doubt, to question why we let it get in our way when we know it's just a part of the process.
When we started the project, our intention was just to make work for fun. But as we interrogated the process and our emotional responses to it, we realized that our desire was actually to make work outside of the modern creative confines, the ones that require us to pit ourselves against each other.
Or to suppress the artistic parts of ourselves, because we've been trained to believe that art has no place in design, that graphic design's sole purpose is to communicate for brands and organizations.
Sure, most of what we learned was in hindsight, but we proved to ourselves that our gut, heart, subconscious, the universe, whatever you want to call it, has our best interests in mind. And that if we relinquish control and just enjoy the process, chances are it'll be worth it.
You know, the biggest threat to the limits of what we can imagine for ourselves are actually our own assumptions. Assuming we're not good enough all the time means we're never imagining a world where we are, in fact, good enough.
We spend so much of our lives caught up in our own heads, we forget how universal self-doubt and fear are. We forget that success can't be predicted, that there's a hot mess of forces at play, and in life, you can only control yourself.
So do it for you, and at least one person, or in our case, two, will be better for it. We set out on this journey because we were tired of the forced collaboration with clients. We wanted a way to break out of that, an outlet of sorts. But the right kind of collaboration, this kind, can be really freeing.
Leaning on each other instead of competing was magic.
It really was. This was literally the easiest project either of us has ever done. We keep sharing this story because we hope it encourages you to find a little time, space, strength to muffle those voices and keep making for the joy of it.
We would be remiss not to acknowledge what's going on in the world right now. Well, yes, with some extra time at home, we totally encourage you to start on that project that you've been putting off. We also want to let you know that if you can't, especially right now, your feelings are valid. Finding the joy in making requires a little bit of good timing too.
So you do you, even if that means sitting on the couch and eating chips right now. That's cool.
Yep. Okay, well, thanks, you guys. That's our talk.
Great. Can people hear me? I'm gonna, if you can drop the screen sharing, and I will go to our questions. So I'm gonna take over now, and
Okay.
we're going to go. We have a bunch of questions, so it's good. Thank you for your great talk, and we have some questions for the audience. So just be a second, and I'm going to share. And at this point, I'm hopefully sharing our questions. So we have a number. So basically, the first question is, I think you may have just answered it at the end, but But what advice do you give people who feel this pressure to be super productive in quarantine? We're seeing all this stuff about like, what is your thoughts? Like, it seems even more pressure now to be productive.
Yeah, we've been talking about this a lot amongst ourselves for sure. Do you want to start, Lee?
Yeah, it's definitely almost been amped up because it seems like you have so much of this extra time because we're all stuck at home. But we're also double emotional and I think it's totally valid to take this time to, you know, chill and take care of yourself. But also, if you feel super motivated and bored, you can also take this time to do that thing you've been putting off. So I don't really think there's a right answer. I think taking some time away from social media, because it is hard seeing everyone kind of going in overdrive and making all these things. It can definitely be discouraging, kind of like I talked about in the talk.
Yeah. I mean, I can really only give you my own experience. And I have had a really hard time enjoying the process of making anything in the last 6 weeks. I pulled out my sketchbook on Sunday for the first time since we hit global pandemic status. So, I mean, I think that everybody, like Leandra said, everybody's going to do this and handle this their own way. And I think that's important to just listen to yourself as you move through the stages of grief. Like, this experience is very much mirroring the stages of grief. We are grieving our old way of existing, and sort of stuck in this gray space before the new normal sets in. So take your time. Wake up every morning and see how you feel.
Yeah.
Be kind, I think, to yourself is also important.
Totally.
Okay. So the next question we have is, you both really have been really brave to put yourself out there in terms of like sharing your insecurities. Why do you think there's so much, I think everyone has this, but why do you think there's so much trouble about talking about this?
I think that we all, look, being a creative is a costume you put on every day. It's a facade, right? We put that on, we curate our existence, we curate our Instagram feed, we curate the clothes we wear, those things. And I think that our insecurities, they don't fit with the facade in the same way, right? Like being that strong creative type, and then also being scared that you're going to fail at all times and that everything you do means nothing and everyone hates you. I think is scary. That was a terrible answer. Your turn, Lee.
No, that was good. I think once we started saying stuff out loud to each other, it was like almost a revelation, and that's kind of even why we showed the Scaries and did the show, because we're like, everyone feels this way, and once you hear someone else say it, it gives you a lot of freedom to say it yourself. That's why I think like our anxiety wall was probably our favorite part about our show, because everyone kind of opened up.
I think that's a really good point. We didn't start this project with the understanding that we would be exploring those kinds of insecurities. We started this project to just make work, but because we were making a shared journal, and part of our intention was to sort of explore why we had such a hard time making work, we started finding that our insecurities overlapped really massively. And the more we talked about it with people, the more we noticed that their insecurities were also things we had felt and resonated with us. And we started incorporating some of those thoughts into the work when we started sharing it on social media. And the response to those was bonkers. And then when we showed it and we asked people to contribute theirs, we thought we'd get like 5 sticky notes. Like,
yeah,
we went through like 2 full packs of like 8. We went through so many sticky notes the wall was covered. We couldn't believe how vulnerable people were willing to be. And I think that gave us a lot more like collective strength, if that makes sense.
Oh, great answer. Actually, this isn't one of the questions, but just hit me when we're talking. Like, what do you think about like, you know, how like our more creative directors or our leaders, like what their role in this is, like more senior people as people are coming into the industry? I think some of us have had mentors that have actually helped with it, but I don't necessarily see a lot of that. Like there's managing your time and your skills, but what about your mental health? How have you seen people in the industry that have like kind of, you know, creating a culture? Like, is there a culture that lets people be vulnerable? Like, sorry, maybe I didn't phrase it right, but you feel that like there's like the way we organize our teams, is there enough focus on like our mental health and our ability to sell our designs, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a priority in corporate culture, at least. I think there's a trend towards it becoming more of a priority. And I think this moment we're in right now poses, you know, it opens up a really interesting opportunity for that to become even more important in our workplaces moving forward. I think that a lot of it, you know, culture is built from the top down. It's really hard to build culture from the bottom up. But I also think that, you know, young people getting into the industry or people who are sort of in the mid-level, you have the ability to hold on to mental health as a priority. And when you become more senior, you can find ways to open up space for those things. I don't know. That's sort of the best answer I have for that.
Now, someone asked basically, how do you preserve your creative voice and self-confidence when you're working for a domineering creative director who wants it done their way? So I guess leadership that doesn't seem to trust you.
That one seems well suited to you, Lee.
I mean,
you just work
yeah.
with a lot of creative directors.
I mean, usually with me, creative directors come to me because they know my work and my style.
Which I think is a really good tip. Like, make sure that the work that you're putting out is the kind of work you want to make. Make sure that you're being hired for the kind of work that you want to make.
Exactly. And I think it took me a while to learn that, instead of just trying to be everything and do whatever anyone needed. In illustration, it's definitely important to show your own voice in your portfolio and try your best to stick to that. But I mean, I'm still working on it. I think it can definitely be much more relevant when you're working in graphic design and in that space, because it's even more, I don't know, client forward. I don't know what the right word is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that maybe there's a little less communication between the client and the team who's actually doing the work. Like, at least you have a direct connection to the creative director often, or the client. I think that the only way you get to maintain your own voice is if you make space yourself for your own voice. So a thing that LeeAndra and I say to ourselves a lot and remind each other of a lot is that you can't actually control anyone else's actions. You can only control your own. So I'm assuming, I don't know who this person is or your actual situation, but I'm assuming maybe you're like not directly reporting to this creative director and there's a couple layers between you. You know, the thing you can do is either, if it's available to you, make time for a personal project on the side, or a personal practice of some sort, to keep in touch with your own tone of voice, your own aesthetic. The other thing you can do is you can always deliver more than one option. So you can always do the thing that you know that they're asking for, and then do one more thing that is the way you would like to explore it. And who knows, right? Again, there's always a hot mess of forces at play. You don't know you can never know every single restraint that exists on any given project. But maybe pieces of the stuff that you really love will make their way into the final product.
Yeah.
The next question we have is like, as a junior designer, often my work is not up to me. How do you find joy in work that you don't love, agree with, I guess?
I think it's almost the same answer.
Yeah.
Like, that's either up to you to like find space to do the kind of work you really want to do, or to be doing like one extra deliverable. Like, hey, I also thought about this. What do you think?
Oh, I used to sneak illustrations in all of my design work and just hope, and I would just hope that my art directors and creative directors would see it and say, oh, cool, let's keep that, which happened, but not all the time. It was worth a shot.
It's true. I've been known to rewrite headlines to be able to get an idea through, and sometimes it works.
Yeah.
Well, basically, you kind of do what they ask, but then you actually also put in suggestions and try and be true to yourself. Like, so, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'm just being mindful of time. We probably have like about 5 minutes left, but some of these are simpler questions. So I guess I'll combine a couple. One is that I think you've answered that you obviously still work outside the Scaries. Like, question is, well, some people said we love your work. Do you sell prints?
Yeah, we do. Thanks for an opportunity. Shameless plug. Yeah, if you head to this,
definitely do that.
if you head to the scariesproject.com, you can not only send your scaries into the void, which we would love you to do. It feels amazing. There's also a shop link there, and you can go. We have stickers, which are very cute, hand-painted tote bags, and we have some original screen prints and original mini paintings from our original show, and some risographs that are new.
Yeah. Check it out.
So I guess I'll just do a last question before we switch, because we've got a few minutes. This one makes me sad. So basically, it's like, what advice do you give for students who are graduating now and in the current environment? Like, they're basically amplified. Everything seems amplified about with insecurities, like coming into a kind of a scary new situation that none of us have really dealt with before. Like someone being in school now.
I've been thinking about this one a lot. I'm going to shamelessly plug something else. The RGD, the Registered Graphic Designers, for which I am the president of, we're hosting a conference called Creative Directions. It's virtual. It happens next week. If you search RGD Creative Directions, that URL will come up. And it is a conference catered towards graduating students or soon to graduate students who are entering the workforce now, as a way to connect them to some industry, make up for some of those coffee dates and interviews they might get to go on. As for like the useful information, there's an entire generation of people that graduated into the 2008 financial crisis. They're still working. We're going to get through this. It's going to look a little different, might take a little bit longer. I think that all of those insecurities you have right now, the situation we're in has absolutely nothing to do with you. It's just really shit timing. So I think that it's a really lovely opportunity as well. I think that it's true of students. I think it's also true of more senior designers as they're moving from job to job. We don't take enough time between things to like really decompress our past experience and open ourselves up to whatever new opportunity is in front of us. So I think that as much as this totally blows, I'm not going to sugarcoat that, this sucks for anyone graduating into this industry, you also have the opportunity to take a minute, reconnect with yourself, reconnect with your own tone of voice, your own aesthetic, your own process. Even if that means eating chips on the couch, like that's fine. I think the other thing that I will say, and Lee, you probably have some stuff to add to this too, is that like humanity right now is like collectively going through a thing So there are large chunks of the industry who are opening themselves up on Twitter, on Instagram, who are like making themselves available to you. They're opening their DMs. They're setting up virtual coffees.
Portfolio reviews.
All of these things. Just because there might not be any jobs in this moment, there might not be any in-office internships, whatever it might be, there aren't as many events where you can go and meet people face-to-face, doesn't mean you can't introduce yourself and ask someone to review your portfolio, or if you can ask them some questions about their journey. For the most part, people are being really, really supportive and open with their time.
Yeah. And I just want to comment that, like, just from working in a corporate environment right now, digital has really kind of stepped up. That the value of like some of the stuff we do as designers is a little more.
Yeah.
I look at it was a lot more valued by people. So I do feel while there's this lull, obviously, like people aren't hiring right now, that you're going to see like when whatever the new normal is, it's going to be a little more a little more focus on digital. So this could actually work out with a lot more digital jobs. So I wouldn't say the future is bleak. I think it's probably actually in longer term, I think we're going to wind up with more jobs. That's just my gut from what I'm hearing where I work.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting point.
Well, yeah, because we're like, you look at it, people are attempting online orders now that never did it before. I can get a coffee, I can get donuts from the baker down the street through this email, and those people are seeing there's ways that we can still do our business and use digital solutions. So user experience people are like really valued right now. At least I find in my experience.
I also think that our skill set as visual translators is always going to be in demand. Marketing budgets might get a little tighter next year, but that skill set is always valuable. There's always space for it. Just looks a little different. I keep thinking about, actually, Leandra and I keep talking about, we're just like stuck in the weird gray space in the middle right now. It's just like messy and uncertain.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank you for like an excellent talk. I hope you'll stick around when we, for the end, we might, if any additional questions. Some people have asked about posting some of your things, like the rules about your social media separation rules. And I think, if either, we'll share links to your site, or if you want to share any of your PowerPoints or at least those rules with people, I think you're very accessible online. So I think those are the only questions I didn't get into, or those kind of things, like, can you share some things? So we'll connect you with people after. So right now I'm going to stop sharing. I think I'm going to give a cue to, again, bear with, thank you guys for one. This has been an experiment. We're still learning how to do these things. So I'm going to now switch over to Amélie. I think Amélie, and I'm hoping that this is going to seamlessly switch to yours. And I said, and I hope you'll come back and we'll regroup at the end and we'll talk. So thank you for this is just a wonderful presentation, and I'm looking forward to hearing Amélie. Amélie, I guess I've just butchered your name several times. I'm sorry. It's not, anyway, so you can start, and I think let's see. Hopefully, we're able to switch over.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Let me here. I'll present my screen.
If I turn, I stopped, so you should be able to present, I think.
I'm still working on it. Just give me a second.
Oh, no problem.
Okay. Almost there.
I'll mute once I'm out, once you're up, so I'll let you know if I see it. If it doesn't happen in a minute, we might talk to Carmen, who's hopefully listening. But there we go.
Yay!
I'm going to introduce you again. I'm really looking forward to this talk. Thank you. And you inspired this event in terms of being online, because you offered to do it online first, and I appreciate that. That got us started to do the whole thing online. So thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Well, thank you for having me. Thanks for hosting this event. Definitely been looking forward to talking about this and to being part of it. So, like the lady said, if we can't do this in person, then we can still connect and find new ways to connect. And God knows that we've been like finding new ways to do that and being really creative on that front. So that's great. My name is Amélie, and I'm a content strategist at Shopify, somewhat similar to a UX writer. I'm originally from Gatineau, Quebec. After school, I moved around a bit, but not too far. I went to Montreal, and I also lived in Toronto for a while. Now I live in Ottawa. I've been at Shopify for almost 3 years, and since I started working there, I've been part of 2 different teams and had 5 different leads. This will all tie into the topic of practicing self-awareness. So things are always changing at Shopify. In fact, the book Anti-Fragile, a book about things that gain from disorder by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, is somewhat of a company Bible. And we have this saying, thrive on change. It's one of our most important values. I won't lie, it has come in real handy in the past month. At work, we're pushed to get comfortable with the uncomfortable, with ambiguity, to do things we've never done before, because we simply can learn how. Although ambiguity is not great when it comes to writing good content, a healthy dose of it can be quite empowering, constructive, and creative when it comes to organizational culture and innovation. I've personally found that accepting this constant ambiguity at work, pushing myself to welcome change and even thrive on it, has helped me shift my perspective from fear and discomfort to curiosity. I see the opportunity. But this new mindset didn't come without struggle, and it's always a work in progress. Before I joined Shopify, I was a communicator in the public sector for about 8 years. I'm a passionate person, always eager to take on new projects, to learn, to impress, to work hard. I landed good roles as a result of that. But in spite of those traits, my first year at Shopify was difficult. I found it very hard to feel like I was an ass-kicking superstar again. I wasn't getting the same praise and recognition that I was able to getting before. Everything was different. So I first got particularly interested in the topic of self-awareness early in my career at Shopify, as I was doing my best to figure out what I could do to feel like I was kicking ass again. And this is what I'll talk about today. I'll try to get you to see why practicing self-awareness is important, and I'll introduce you to the blind spots, which are essentially barriers to growth. I'll give you tips to remove those barriers so you can push your ability to always grow in all aspects of your life. So this was my aha moment. Towards the tail end of my first year at Shopify, we were invited to submit presentation ideas for a team event. My initial reaction was like a cold sweat and a few words from the back of my head. Oh, that's not for me. For nearly 1 year, I had been hiding from the spotlight. I'd been afraid to teach or talk in front of a group. I finally took note of this like very familiar voice in my head, and I paused. Why not? Because I have nothing to teach, the little voice answered. The Scaries. Is that really true? I do have more than 10 years of working experience. I figured that this was a new fear. I had spent most of my child and teenage years on stage, after all, dancing, acting, and singing. I wasn't afraid of being in the spotlight then or trying something new. What had I become afraid of? I'd succumbed to knowledge blindness, and there were things I'd come to believe about myself regarding my skills, my weaknesses, that weren't a just assessment of my true abilities. I'll get back to that soon. I was thinking, what if I suck? What if they don't care about the topic? They're so smart, I'm probably not going to tell them anything new. All I was doing was holding myself back from an opportunity to learn. I picked up a few books that helped me understand what was going on in my anxious mind. Daring Greatly by Brené Brown, and Insight by Dr. Tasha Eurich. Brené talks about vulnerability and how being vulnerable actually makes us stronger. It helps us build resilience to taking risks because 99% of the time, when we take the risk of being vulnerable, we realize that, hey, we're not dead, and we might even have learned something new or created a deeper connection with someone. Dr. Tasha Eurich studied self-awareness for years and says that few of us actually know ourselves really well. We have a very inaccurate understanding of who we are, what we're good at, what our strengths at, what we need to grow, what we need to learn to improve, and the kind of impact that we have on other people until we start asking around. Then I realized, hey, I read something cool. I learned something cool. I could talk about that. So I faced my inner demons and hosted a workshop on practicing self-awareness a few times at work, guiding teams as they take the time to reflect on barriers to their growth. For you, I've converted the 90-minute workshop into a 30-minute talk and made up for my immature design skills with a lot of entertaining sitcom gifts. So let's see how this goes. Obviously, reading a few books and being interested in the topic doesn't make me an expert in self-awareness. So my mission here today is to accompany you as we explore the findings of smart people who studied this a lot more than me, and use my own stories and the stories of my colleagues or people I know to explain the barriers to growth. But why should you care? Why engage in this ooey gooey soft skillsy stuff? You're professional. You could be spending time learning a new skill right now. In my efforts to lean into the stretch and figure out how to have impact in my new role, I spent some time having vulnerable conversations with colleagues. I noticed that I wasn't the only one paralyzed by the imposter syndrome or my ego or both. Most of my colleagues revealed that they also had to face tough truths about themselves in order to evolve and grow over the course of their careers. Be honest, did you ever miss out on opportunities to take on an ambitious new challenge at work because you thought you weren't good enough or didn't know how? Did you ever work with someone who behaved like they had rare talent and you knew that they weren't nearly as good at their job or confident as they let on? Did you ever feel the need to prove your worth, to become the office superstar, so bad that you were willing to do anything at all to be recognized as indispensable, and yet the praise never came? To thrive at work and to thrive in life, we have to be willing to find out what gets in the way of us growing into better professionals, partners, or parents. To become wiser, smarter, kinder, more skilled people, we have to seek out the truth about ourselves. Here's where opening your mind to practicing self-awareness is important and impactful. So research has demonstrated that people who know themselves and how others see them are happier, make smarter decisions, have better personal and professional relationships, choose better careers, are more effective leaders, raise more mature children, so on and so forth. Self-awareness essentially is the ability to see ourselves clearly, to accurately understand who we are, our skills, what we want out of life, how we behave, how others see us, and how we fit into the world. It's the meta skill of the 21st century. The qualities most critical to success all stem from self-awareness. Emotional intelligence, empathy, influence, persuasion, communication, collaboration. We've all heard them. The opposite of that is self-delusion. Self-delusion is the inability to see ourselves clearly. It's basically the gap between how we see ourselves and who we really, really are. Researchers have proven that senior executives who lack self-awareness are 600% more likely to fail. And I know that this sounds really crazy, but I read it in a book. People or employees who lack self-awareness increase conflict by 30%, are more likely to feel unhappy in their careers and don't know how to fix the problem, constantly make choices that don't line up with their goals or what's good for them, and even bring down their team performance. I'm not kidding, developing our self-awareness is necessary to our survival at work and in our personal life. Publicly traded companies with poor financial returns are 79% more likely to have large numbers of employees who lack self-awareness. This means that companies that have a lot of employees who lack self-awareness are more likely to have poor financial returns. It's no wonder that Shopify encourages us to practice self-awareness so we can thrive in a changing environment. Organizations that create a culture of open, constructive communication where candid feedback is encouraged and welcome, they provide their employees with the tools that they need to boost their impact at work. Think about it. If you felt safe to speak frankly at work, to give honest, constructive feedback to your peers or your boss, wouldn't they have valuable insights they could use to then evaluate their actual impact and performance at work? And if based on the same value, you often solicited honest, constructive feedback for yourself, wouldn't you then be better equipped to recognize the skills that you need to improve or the knowledge that you need to acquire so you can reach your goals? People who practice self-awareness arm themselves with the power to stay on course with their goals, to gut check their biases, motivations, their insecurities, and ultimately kick out the shit that gets in the way of the growth. So to become truly self-aware, we have to know ourselves and how others see us. Internal self-awareness is knowing ourselves, is being aware of our own values, goals, passions, and the context in which we thrive. If you have high internal self-awareness, you tend to make choices that are in line with who you truly are. You tend to be happier. If you have low internal self-awareness, that's internal self-delusion, then you tend to act in ways that are incompatible with your true success and happiness, like staying in a job that makes you miserable, for example. External self-awareness is about knowing how other people see us. It's basically about understanding the actual impact that we have on them. If we have high external self-awareness, then we're able to see ourselves from their perspective, and therefore we're able to build stronger, more trusting relationships. If we have low external self-awareness, that's external self-delusion, then we can be so disconnected from how we come across to others that we're surprised by the feedback that we get. My father always said, too much of any good thing is not good. For example, leaning too far into internal self-awareness can make you very, very self-absorbed and then completely blind to the impact that you have on other people. And leaning too far into external self-awareness can make you so sensitive to other people's opinions of you that you'd be absolutely incapable of making decisions in support of your own welfare at all. You'd be paralyzed to support your own happiness. You can try Dr. Tasha Urich's insight quiz to find out where you sit in that quadrant, self-awareness quadrant, if you want. I wouldn't rely on this test only to draw conclusions about how aware you are. It's very broad and very abstract, but you can add this to your arsenal as you try to increase and get to know yourself and increase your self-awareness. It's pretty simple. You take the quiz, you invite someone who knows you to take the same quiz about you. It's quick and painless, 14 questions. So it may or may not surprise you to find out that our ego is not our friend. Ego is an idealistic image of ourselves that we tend to build over the years. It's that sense of like our own skills that far transcend reality. Ego is an insecure sidekick who talks a big game. It's when competence is on the verge of transforming into arrogance. When our sense of self is detached from reality, reality inevitably one day becomes harder and harder to reach. Giving lots of room to our ego nurtures a fixed mindset. Like if everything is either good or bad news about our precious traits, then we're less open to accurate information about our current and real abilities. We're a lot less willing to learn the truth about anything. Ego is a symptom of self-delusion, and it can grow with rank seniority. By the time you become VP of a big company, you could say that you've experienced quite a bit of success, which people have recognized. But success can breed an intoxicating pride, which is often a lot more fun to pay attention to than the cold hard truth. I mean, how would your boss react if you told them respectfully that they don't listen, and as a result are completely blind to the fact that their team is on the brink of collapse and that you won't achieve your quarterly goals? Would you even feel safe giving them that feedback? Here's our first blind spot, our first growth barrier, knowledge blindness. What do you think you know about your skills, your expertise, and your performance at work? Research reveals that we almost never accurately evaluate our own abilities and knowledge. Apparently, people who perform the worst are more likely to overestimate their abilities. I once worked with an engineer manager who was so blind to his own shortcomings, it cost him his job. We'll call him Malcolm. When we worked together, Malcolm managed a team of about 8 brilliant engineers. Malcolm previously had a long career in a big software company and often bragged about how he used to manage a team of 60 people there. I suppose we had to read between the lines that his new small team of 8 was small potatoes for him. But really, behind the scenes, his new team talked about how Malcolm was unable to write good code. He didn't understand their work at all and didn't trust them either. Apparently, because they complained apparently he didn't trust them because he complained that he was micromanaging them. They said that they never learned anything from him, and it was totally his responsibility as their manager to teach. All Malcolm really did was carry messages from upper management down to his team. He was a glorified messenger. Maybe managing 60 people at that big software company didn't require him to teach or write code very often. Maybe over the years, his development skills became outdated, eroded, and he didn't have the awareness to recognize this, or to open himself up to the truth so he could learn. Instead, he hid behind others, and also maybe his ego, until the long buried truth of his incompetence came out. It's normal to feel insecure about our skills, but avoiding to hear the truth of our actual strengths and weaknesses most definitely is not conducive to growth. And while we may hold ourselves responsible for being continuous learners, it's also important to be humble and to be kind to ourselves in the process. My content strategist colleague, I'll call her Pam, told me she still feels a lot of pressure sometimes to have the right answer all the time. I'm sure we can all relate. Pam was worried that if she changed her mind about content decisions that she made, her teammates would see her as less capable. She did make mistakes, obviously, because we all do, yet she struggled how to handle it. So instead of sharing her work early in the project lifecycle, Pam put pressure on herself to have all the answers before showing her work, which inevitably hadn't reached perfection anyway. And then she'd beat herself up about tough feedback that she'd received afterwards during like UX critique or something. Pam finally reached out to a trustworthy colleague for advice. Her colleague recommended that she just get over her pride, to show work in progress to her team while explaining her process so they'd understand the level of fidelity of her work. Thankfully, Pam pushed through the fear and she took their advice. She started showing her work earlier in the project lifecycle, and even though she was still exploring solutions. As a result, she got constructive feedback from her peers throughout the entire project lifecycle, which opened her up to new ways of critiquing her own work. Her writing consistently evolved with the work of the designer, her teammates, which helped her build trust with her peers. She increased her ability to make good content decisions quickly, which improved the quality of the end product. And she ended up, by showing product work early, she ended up teaching them how interface copy evolves and contributing to their own development and growth. Becoming aware of a blind spot and taking action to overcome it was 1,000% worth it. And she reminds us that it's definitely an ongoing effort. But being vulnerable and honest about her insecurity helped Pam out. She saw that the fear of failing kept her from truly improving her content decisions. She was willing to make a change, and she took a risk by showing imperfect work, but learned a lot faster and improved her skills as a result. We need opportunities to make mistakes. Feedback can be hard to hear, but if we're brave and we seek the truth, we may find it's accurate. And from there, we have what we need to look for opportunities to learn and grow. This is our second blind spot, emotional blindness. How do your feelings influence your decisions? Do you know of emotions that have influenced important decisions in the past? We often make decisions, even important ones, from a place of emotion without even realizing it. Like I said, my first year at Shopify was a struggle. Not only because I felt it was taking me forever to find my groove at work, I didn't feel impactful, I doubted myself constantly. I also had personal stuff going on. I made an offer on a house, the house of my dreams, and the deal fell through. I separated from someone that I loved very much. And I had a tormented relationship with my family, which I never experienced before. It was a little bit of a trifecta of a lot of things going on in my first year, new job, everything. It was very stressful and difficult, and I felt very anxious. I felt like a loser for being 33 and still not owning a home, failing a second relationship in less than 5 years, struggling to make any kind of decision without everyone's approval, and losing all my confidence at work and not feeling like the knowledgeable, perfect, kick-ass, superstar, professional woman I had always hoped to become. Note that this is how I felt about myself and not at all what I think of other people in similar situations. So 1 week after my separation, I put an offer on a second house. Seems like a good idea. It was a duplex in an up-and-coming neighborhood in Ottawa, which after inspection required anything from $20,000 to $40,000 in renovations very, very soon. A decision that my real estate agent defended as being a smart investment, but that no one in my family supported. Stuck in the middle, I backed out of the deal. After this second attempt at buying a home failed, I plummeted, I would say. I had feelings and behaviors of depression. I thankfully found the energy to get help, and I realized that strong emotions, triggered by much more important and deeply rooted insecurities, had driven me to make a decision that really wasn't compatible with me, with my needs, or my means. This major financial decision was mostly driven by how I felt about myself. A paper published in the Harvard EDU files, Emotion and Decision Making, states that emotion and decision making go hand in hand. Emotions are the dominant driver of most meaningful decisions in life. Decisions are the conduit through which emotion guide everyday attempt at avoiding negative feelings like guilt, fear, regret, and increasing positive feelings like pride, happiness, and love. And when the outcomes of those decisions materialize, we often feel new emotion like elation, surprise, or regret. According to researchers, our brain interprets the question, how happy are you with life these days, the same way it interprets the question, what mood am I in right now? The first question basically morphs into the next. So even when we think we're carefully deliberating a certain decision or a certain question, we're actually making more of a gut decision. In her book, Insight, Tasha Eurich says, the more aware we are of the existence of the emotional process that drive our decisions, the better chance we have of overcoming them. There's nothing wrong with our emotional process. Evidently, our emotions are intricately tied to many things that make us human. Our ability to think, how we choose to dress, our artistic creations, our preferences. But it's almost impossible, though, to act on emotional blindness unless we're able to identify those emotions, name them, and understand the impact that they have on our life. Practicing self-awareness simply makes us more aware of the existence of the emotions that drive our decisions and help us proactively recognize situations where they tend to come up. This is our final and third blind spot, behavior blindness. How does your behavior impact people around you? Research reveals that we're very bad at accurately evaluating our own behavior. Our perspective on our own behavior almost never matches the observation of an objective witness. A designer colleague of mine, I'll call her Elaine, found out the hard way that she had to work on boosting her external self-awareness. Elaine had a very strong grasp on her goals. She was a talented designer and felt she was ready to lead her discipline at Shopify. An important project came along, a project that would be very impactful for our merchants, and with it, the opportunity to prove her worth. A team was assembled, and she would lead design on the project. Elaine was relentless in the pursuit of the goals of the project, the quality of the work, the speed at which it was delivered. Elaine's urge to have impact at work and represent her discipline was so intense, it overshadowed everything else. She had tunnel vision. She was so eager to prove herself and do her best that she didn't see the stuff on either side of that, like her relationship with colleagues, her lead, and even time to rest. Instead of being a human, a team member contributing to a project with others, she was fixating on representing and advocating for discipline. She was in a hurry to do and have answers, fighting for a cause that didn't need to be fought, she says, instead of sharing the burden of figuring it out together as a team. In the meantime, everything she did was so closely tied to her ambition that her interactions with others became overly transactional. Conversations were brittle, they were focused on accomplishments and less centered on learning and growing as a team. People found it hard to have conversations with her, person to person, because she was always advocating. The day the project launched, she couldn't celebrate. She just saw the struggle, not the success. She realized that she'd burned some bridges and lost some trust. So she decided that she would ask for a team for feedback. She let herself hear it, even though it was hard to hear. She spent some time thinking about how the expectations that she put on herself and how those expectations influenced her behavior. After that, she focused on mending relationships with colleagues instead of concentrating solely on the finish line. Insights related to behavior are essential for feedback to be actionable and constructive. The feedback culture is deeply rooted in our day at Shopify, and that's why. Anyone who first joins Shopify will, during the onboarding period, practice to offer feedback using the SBI model. You may have heard of it. Situation, the context or situation in which the behavior occurred. Behavior, the specific behavior observed. Impact, the outcome of the behavior on a person, on a project, a work environment, a relationship, etc. Situation, behavior, and impact are the key components of effective, actionable, timely feedback. It helps the person offering feedback clearly structure the conversation, and it helps the person receiving it build self-esteem, self-awareness about the effects of their action. It can sound like this. During our team meeting Monday, I saw you cut off Stacy twice. First, when she was trying to give Owen feedback on his design process, and second, when Mike wanted eyes on the content. As a result, the team didn't benefit from Stacy's ideas. It's important that we make space for our diverse perspective. And we didn't get to hear Stacy's perspective. At our next team meeting, please be aware of this and try to make sure that everyone gets the chance to speak if they want to. You should also use the SBI model to give positive feedback. It could sound like this. In our team meeting Tuesday, I noticed that you intentionally called out those who had not spoken yet and gently invited them to communicate their ideas if they wanted. First myself, and then Peter. Thank you for stepping up to ensure that everyone was being heard. I find it intimidating to speak up because there are strong personalities on the team. It made me feel like you valued my opinion. Sorry. So feedback can be hard to give, and it can be hard to receive. But since we're so inaccurate in our own assessment of behavior, soliciting feedback regularly is an effective way to get the facts. The good news is that it gets easier with practice. In summary, developing self-awareness can help us have a more fulfilling life, make better decisions, learn more, and therefore boost our impact on our team, the company, our families. The world's your oyster. Not developing it can lead us to make decisions that are not in line with who we are, what we want, let us become bad leaders who have negative impact on our team and the company, and ultimately make us feel unfulfilled and unhappy. So how do we see the light? How do we remove those blind spots? Well, remember that self-awareness is something that you can practice and develop much like a skill. So that's how we overcome your blind spots. To have the tools to practice self-awareness, you need to keep your ego at bay by pushing yourself to challenge your skill and knowledge. Keep learning. Keeps you modest. Ask for feedback early and often. Be specific. Do you want technical feedback or behavioral feedback? What skill do you want to learn? Which skill do you want to improve? And it helps to have questions ready. It helps the other person basically get to the point. Ask what questions. In what situations do you see me holding myself back? What is the one thing I could start doing to increase my impact at work? What did I do that resulted in a positive outcome? What was the impact of my behavior or action in situation X? Remember that sometimes people are not ready to provide feedback right away, so give them time. They may need a few moments, hours, days even, to think and form a response. Resist the urge to fill the void and wait for them to share. Embrace the awkward. Truly listen. Getting constructive feedback can be hard, even when you ask for it. You may feel defensive, angry, or upset, and it's normal, but try to simply listen to understand the person's point of view. You may disagree, and that's okay. But someone else's perspective is just more context to help you understand the impact of your actions. Ask more questions when you need clarification and avoid leading with but. Reward the feedback. If you want honest feedback, you have to show that you appreciate and respect the feedback that you get. Always thank the person and show that you value their perspective. And even if you don't completely agree, find something that you do agree with and point it out. And bring the feedback culture to your team or your company. The benefits of feedback are exponential when the entire organization embraces it. Start small, try with your closest colleagues first, your buddies, invite candid feedback from your peers and offer it, use the SBI model, and then invite your entire immediate team to participate. And maybe one day the culture, your team culture, will extend to your company as a whole. It's important to accept who you are and to adopt a growth mindset to constantly challenge yourself to improve without judgment. Don't get mad at yourself. Understand it, accept it, act on it, research, improve, test, iterate. Sounds familiar? Where you 1.0 may not have been so good at seeing or acknowledging even your shortcomings, you 2.0 may demonstrate humility and service to your values, your abilities, your team's impact, and the greater good. Remember my house purchase disaster when issues in my personal life and my ego influenced a major financial decision? It could have been overcome by feelings of resentment, powerlessness, and self-doubt. I could have gotten into trouble at work, even had I stayed paralyzed like this for a long time, or had I continued running away from opportunities to step up. I could have been in financial distress for all I know, making major financial decisions because I felt like a loser. I could have let resentment distance me from my family, who I know only did what they did or said what they said because they care. But it was my aha moment, and I used it to grow. So why do I say that practicing self-awareness will save your ass? Well, because I'm convinced that it saved mine. That's it. Thanks for your interest in well-being for you first, which inevitably then impacts your career. I hope that you're walking away with a few tips. And thanks for staying home and accepting the challenge of participating in an online event too. I appreciate that. And don't hesitate to reach out to me via email if you'd like to offer me some feedback on the topic or the delivery of this presentation. Stay safe and healthy, everyone.
Thank you so much. You can hear me?
Yes.
Cool. Hank, that's just amazing. Like such an inspiring talk. We do have some questions, so I'm gonna go to there. So a few, some really good questions here. So I'll start with when I receive feedback or critiques from my team, I usually feel stressed, discouraged, and like I let the team down. How do you overcome this feeling?
Yeah, it's hard. I think that like I have a colleague who is really, 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 really good at asking for feedback and receiving it. Essentially, he has a notepad and he just takes notes. He doesn't really defend his because defend make the verb defend makes you defensive, right? It tends to make you like, oh well, I made this decision, blah blah blah, because blah blah blah. He just writes notes. If he doesn't have the answers, he'll just say, I don't have the answer. I'll thank you for your question. I'll like look into it. And he basically just explains his process. Instead of defending the design, he explains the process. And that way he basically opens a door for like more constructive questions that he can use for improving his design. And I'd emphasize like not waiting too long before showing work. Like I prefer, like, it's definitely part of the culture in the company. And I think that like, it's great if you like push yourself to do this, to just show your work in progress and get feedback often by stating where you are in your process and like saying like this is the level of fidelity of my work. I'm like at 30% or 40% or 70%, you know, I'm not like, that way it lets people know that this is not finished. You're still working on it, and it manages expectations and it makes you feel a little less defensive.
Okay. Next question we had was, are there are there any techniques that you use to become more self-aware? Like how did you approach like how do you continue to be self-aware? Like you obviously had that aha moment, but how do you continue, and what techniques do you use to keep yourself in check?
Yeah, like aha moments, like they can come in small waves, like a little off the cuff comment from someone around you, or like a peer or something. Um, like I don't know, like I've heard journaling is a good thing, but I don't do it very often. I think that like uh, I don't know if I'm really good at being super diligent about it, but what I think I'm really good at is like being real. I've found a way to like shed my ego, and which I think like ego is this like image, right? When we're like this image of the designer, this image of like the UXer, like you're supposed to be this and that and that. Like get rid of like that image entirely and be real. Like when you have chats with your boss or your lead or like colleagues and stuff, like if you're struggling with something, like say it. When I'm struggling with something, I say, hey, I'm struggling with that thing, or I don't know where to go next, or this relationship is really difficult for me. Like, I don't know how to work with this person. Like, this is what's happening that makes it difficult for me. Um, I think that being like real talk with my peers and my colleagues and my boss helps me, at least at work, um, get a clearer picture of like, there's my perspective on the situation or my perspective on my work, and then it invites their perspective on those same things as well, and it helps me gut check. Like it keeps my blind spots in check a little bit. You could try journaling. Like I haven't done that, so I can't tell you it works or not, but I have an agenda. I haven't shown you, it's right here. I get a nice agenda at the beginning of the year, every year, an agenda I'm gonna like really feel excited to use and write in. And I don't only take notes about like the work I have to do. I take notes about everything, like mostly the questions that I have. And I think that approaching work or like the craft or your working relationships from a questions perspective um, helps a lot. And not so much why, because it's really hard to get down to the motivations of people or your own motivations, and it can get you into like a very self-absorbed loop. Focus on like what is important about this problem, or what is important about my relationship with this person, or what does this person care about, like what kind of like message would resonate with them, et cetera, et cetera.
So another question we had was, so how you went through your own aha moment. One of the questions was they have a colleague that's brutally unself-aware, and like how do they approach it? How do you talk to that person and say, hey, you're not aware, or you're doing stuff, like how you have that hard conversation? Have you had have that since, you know?
Yeah, I have actually. That Malcolm person, I had a chat with him. Okay, so that is really hard. Definitely, I would not start with, hey, you're not self-aware, or you're not aware of how bad of a jerk you are being, because that's definitely like, that's the judgment piece, right? So like what I did before chatting with Malcolm is I wrote down the things he was doing, or the things that he was saying, that made people feel so defensive and escalated meetings, the tone in meetings. Like, okay, so the problem was that um, uh, every time we were in a meeting with Malcolm, uh, often the PM or other people in the room would get like increasingly defensive, very, very defensive. And the tone in the meeting would like shoot up, and like the tension was palpable, and everyone was annoyed. And so I promised myself that in the next meeting, I would take note of the things that he was doing and the things that he was saying. So, and he did something with the PM that he did what he usually does with the PM. And then he also kind of made me feel like really shitty. And I was like, okay, good, now is the time. So 30 minutes after that meeting, I scheduled a chat with him. And in that 30 minutes buffer I had between the two meetings, I wrote down everything I could. Like the situation was the meeting we had a few minutes ago with, our PM, and then the behaviors, and I listed them, and then the impact of that. It made me feel defensive, and I could observe that the PM was also feeling like he had to justify his work and his decisions and everything. And then I asked, do you have a hard time trusting people on the team? And if so, what is it that makes it hard for you to trust people on the team? And it was probably the one time where I gave feedback that I did it, that I just kicked ass at doing it. And it was so good, proud of myself. But one thing that we have to recognize is that we can't change people. You don't control people. All you control is how you communicate with them, and that you tell them the truth respectfully. And then you have given them the power to do the work that they need to do. And then after that, it's out of your hands.
Um, we have a few questions too about you've shown a lot of links, you've shown a lot of really great research into it. People are asking if they could see your slides, or do you share work and other getting links to books or other things?
Yeah. I would actually gladly share links to the books that I love reading in my LinkedIn. It's because all of this really comes from me reading from other sources. I'll just send you straight to the sources. It's so much better. So I personally have Ego is the Enemy from Ryan Holiday, is very interesting if you're interested in the topic of ego and understanding what that is. I think it's often confused with confidence. So obviously Insight from Tasha Urich, Darren Greatly from Brené Brown. I will put the links in my profile, on LinkedIn. Mindset, and I forget the author, Carol something. I'll find it and I'll give it to you. I'll put it on my LinkedIn profile. Look it up.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Good luck. One of the bigger questions we have is that you really have a positive energy. How in the current climate of working at homes where social interactions are very limited, in some ways there's a lot of people on the phone back and forth, but there's not a lot of that being able to read people. How have you been able to stay positive and focused, or how have you been able to stay positive and focused? It sounds like you have, but how would you say someone in a new situation, when your dynamic is totally changed, how do you kind of apply that kind of skill?
Yeah, it's hard. I don't. I think that there are days where we're not feeling so positive, and back to that slide where I'm just be cool with it. It's fine. You're not perfect, and you're gonna fail, and stop judging. That's really important. I think negative judgment doesn't really yield positive results. Accepting that something's going on, it's fine. So if you're feeling negative one day, it's fine. Maybe if it happens, you just can't find balance at all, and there's more days that are just shitty than there are days where you feel you have energy. Then what works for me is I like to do yoga, and I'm pretty active. I like to be active, and it's been hard to be active in this locked up in a box, and I can't run anymore. So I've been doing yoga in the morning, and I'm not a morning person either. And I was there's no way that I'm gonna let myself sleep until 9, because I start work at 9:30, and then rush coffee and breakfast, and then I'm not gonna do this for however long this lasts. It's not healthy. So I don't always succeed at this, but I've been I have this podcast in the morning. It's Wake Me Up. And oh my God, I still have to go on his Instagram and say that I talked about him on this talk. But Wake Me Up, and he basically from bed at I set my alarm at 6:30 or 7, and from bed I'm groggy and I hate life. I'm I don't want to wake up. I turn it on, and he just talks you through meditation. while you're in bed to like get you to like basically wake up gently and stretch and whatever. So I do that. It's about 15, 20 minutes. And then I jump out of bed and then I put on my soft clothes, my comfy pants, and then I go do yoga like 20 minutes. And then I do like get ready, coffee, breakfast, all of that, right? So like by the time, and then I have an hour at 9, between 9 and 10, I want to read something so I can learn something new. And it can be anything. It doesn't have to be related to my job. That's like a structure I've created in my day, that I do things I like that make me feel good. And usually it makes me feel better.
That's awesome. That's really good advice. Like, I think we're all struggling with our new routine, and some things you say, oh, I'll try this for a few days, and it really doesn't work. And I think we're all kind of hit and miss. So it's good when you find a routine that works, that makes you feel good.
I will say though, I won't pretend like I do it every morning. Like sometimes I go through like 4 meditations, like 2 hours later, I'm like, oh wait, I missed it. I didn't wake up.
I think one thing I learned from this talk too, from the previous presenters, is that some days it is okay to eat potato chips and feel bad. You know, if it makes you ultimately, some days you feel like good, let's do productive things. I have one more question that is really good. I used to, this is someone, so it's not me. I used to report to a creative director who gave harsh, non-constructive feedback. How could I have asked him to be more constructive and empathetic?
Oh, that's good. Yeah, this is a great opportunity for like constructive feedback. So like I would use the SVM model to be like, you know, the last time you gave me feedback, ideally there's a date, there's a day, and hopefully you don't wait like 6 months, because then you kind of miss the boat. Like it's better like timely, right? So quick feedback, so you can wait a few days at most. So like Monday, when we were together, you know, you were giving me feedback on my work. Try to remember what the person said and how they phrase things. Like when, you know, you said, you know, XYZ, you know, that my, when you said that my design was shit, it made me feel like my whole process was worthless. Not just the outcome of the process or like the visible part of it. You know, is it possible that next time that you give me feedback, could you try asking me questions instead about my process and what led to the outcome that you're able to see? And you're basically offering a very constructive way for the person to think about how they're going to give you feedback next time they give you feedback. And it's really impossible to say no to that.
True. I mean, as their boss, they should also be like more in tune for how they're affecting you, you'd think.
Well, yeah, and we're all human. Like, you know, there's people I love who have said things that I found difficult to digest, and I don't always have to say something about it. But if it's recurring and it has like, you know, an impact, a real impact that lasts, then I'll say something, and often it just enriches the relationship. So, yeah, it's worth it.
And someone asked what the name of the podcast was. I think you said it was Wake Me Up.
Wake Me Up. Yeah, it's great.
Well, definitely, as you said, like we'll share. Hopefully, if you want to share out your deck too, like if you post it on LinkedIn or something like that. I think I don't think there's many more questions, so and I think we're getting close to the end time. So maybe you could welcome back the Scaries and yeah. I would just like to thank the 3 of you on behalf of UXPA for just an amazing talk. I think it's very timely, and you could tell that I think you guys help a lot of people. And I think that there seems to be, like, when you see the questions, there's people that want to reach out and get resources from you. So I think that, you know, you all have more followers. Oh, you brought your dog.
Lenny!
Yeah, my dog. Cooper with the dog.
I
My
miss
dog-
LeeAndra, but I also miss Lenny a lot.
Well, yeah, I mean, just a new norm of dogs crashing our talks. Mine crashed a talk recently, and then people are like, "So where's the dog?" It's like, it's like,
It's like a requirement.
it's a requirement. Like, they don't want me in the meeting, but my dog, sure. I really felt think this was a real experiment. I really appreciate that you guys you all came early, that you gave a lot of your time to play, to make sure that this would work and get benefit of the doubt when things weren't. And I appreciate the audience for some of the little hiccups we had, because it's the first time we tried it. We should also thank you people maybe didn't see, or maybe they did at the beginning, with Carmen, who is our MVP, who made this all work. He put a lot of effort into making this work. So he, when I was panicking behind the scenes, he was there. So you didn't see the stuff he was doing. So he made it hopefully seamless for you, and I hope everyone enjoyed it. And I hope that we're hopefully going to have more of these events. I do find it's sometimes easier to come out to something like this, and cordially invite you to our next event, whenever that is. We're going to be sending out a survey to everyone that joined, and I'll be asking, one, how they enjoyed this event, what they feel comfortable with in the upcoming, like what they'd like to see, what type of events, because we've also obviously had a tough year. We've had some false starts on our we were, I think, a week away from having our last event when the world went to hell for a day. So
Yeah.
so at time we had to make that decision early. It turns out it was the right decision, because we would have been right in the middle. So I thank you for offering to make this work. And that's it. I think, thank you. For the people listening, you'll get an email. We'll try and add contact links to just the social media. The Scaries, if you go on Instagram, they have it's very easy to find, and Nicola's probably been live broadcasting some of this. And you're on LinkedIn, Emily?
Yes, I'm LinkedIn and Twitter. LinkedIn and Twitter. And I left my email in there, amelie.sirois@shopify.com. I'm not kidding when I say if you have feedback to give on my presentation, don't hesitate.
Yeah, and on our event page, we actually posted the social media links, so you don't have to read and write them down. Just go back to the event page. You'll see the bios for each person and their social media links. And I know, I think we answered all your questions, but I think if you had a question that didn't get answered, or you had more questions, I know Nicola reached out to say, hey, we'll answer any questions. So you have people that really care. So if you're still kind of struggling, I think our community is there, and you have an example of 3 people who legitimately care about the industry and are open to helping. So I really thank you.
Thanks for setting this up. Really appreciate the opportunity to be speaking about this topic.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Glenn. And Amelie, you were amazing.
Yeah.
Talking to no one into the void would have been very challenging.
So are
Killed
you. Yay!
Yeah, that was weird at the beginning.
Weird.
You were talking, and at first I couldn't hear anyone. I didn't know, but yeah. Thank you, Carmen. I think I don't know how to end things, so it's you want to step in and send everyone home,
Sure.
or how does this go?
Yeah, thanks for coming,
You're
everybody.
muted still, Carmen.
You're muted.
I'm muted? No way. Well, maybe for you guys, but not for the world.
Okay.
So thanks everybody for coming. I really appreciate it. And this talk, it'll be available up on YouTube. We can make it available for people to see if they like.
Oh, good.
Excellent.
Cool.
Okay. Have a good night, everybody.
Have a good night. Stay safe and healthy.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.